Hello everyone, welcome to this live stream about DataFlex dashboards. We're here together with Harm and Henry, and they are able to answer all of your questions that you have about dashboards and dashboards in DataFlex, of course. And I would like also to introduce today a channel partner. Because we're not doing this alone, we're doing this together with our channel partners. And this first live stream, we're going to start off with people that you might know if you are well known in the DataFlex community. And that is our channel partner from the Asia Pacific region, and that is Marco and Joseph. Hello, guys.
Hey. Now, welcome all to the live stream. It's going to be an exciting event, first of two. So today we'll be talking about the dashboards. Next week, Thursday, we're going to be talking about the tech stack. So hope you enjoy what you see. There's going to be a pre-recorded presentation first, which is quite slick. We've seen it itself a few months back, and it's pretty good. And after that, we got a live Q&A. So any questions you have during the event, please type them in the chat thing, which you might have to open, but it's on the right-hand side of the screen. And we'll try to collate the questions and ask them on your behalf at the end of the presentation. And then Harm and Henry will obviously do their best to answer. So very exciting. And let's get the show started. Cheers.
Okay, good. That's it. Are there any questions? Okay, so obviously I'm messing around a little bit here. That's not it. We've got a full hour ahead of us. I have the honor of filling the last slot of this already great day with a full hour talk. And we're going to be spending that hour talking about dashboards, specifically dashboards in DataFlex. But before we actually get to the DataFlex portion of this talk, let's first take a little step back, look at some inspiration, and ask ourselves, well, what exactly is a dashboard? Well, this is a dashboard. This is a dashboard. This is a dashboard. And this is also a dashboard. But what do all of these things have in common? Well, for one, they sure look fancy. And they all seem to contain some sort of combination of graphs, lists, and then some big text. But mostly, it's about these little things. Small, reusable building blocks, we call them widgets, that populate a screen, and together they form a hub of information and quick access. Now you're probably wondering, Henry, what the hell? Why are you showing me all of these dashboards? Why are you telling me this? Why are we even spending time on this? I know what a dashboard looks like. I know what it does. Why are we doing this? Well, I think it is important to look at these pieces of inspiration so we can, from that, formulate a goal for us to work towards. So let's talk a little bit about the goal. And the top-level goal is actually very simple to define. We can condense it down into just one simple sentence. We want to make user-configurable dashboards a possibility in DataFlex. And we actively started working on this goal roughly about a year ago. But this is a top-level goal, and this goal is pretty big. It's not very specific, is it? So what we should be doing is we should be dissecting this goal into more manageable, easier to achieve goals. So we can ask ourselves questions like, well, what should it be capable of and what should it contain? And when you start answering these questions, you'll come to realize that most of the answers that you're going to give fall into one of two categories, one of them being goals for the developer and the other one being goals for the end user. So let's start with the most important one, our goals for the developer. We want to provide you with a simple component that you can add to a view, and this component on its own should facilitate most of what you need to make a dynamic dashboard in your application a reality. We want to provide you with a framework to build these building blocks, these widgets, which sounds simple, but as we progress along this presentation, you'll come to realize that this actually goes pretty deep. We want to allow the developer to define rules for adding and configuring these widgets. We want you to be able to inject things like permissions from your users when it comes to adding and configuring widgets. And we want to provide you with multiple ways to load and store dashboard configurations. The overarching theme here is that we want you to worry about the business logic of your application. We want you to worry about making your dashboard look nice and filling it with all kinds of fancy widgets. We don't want you to worry about how should I even get going and building a dashboard and how does all the user interaction work. That's for us, not for you. What about the end user then? Well, for the end user, we want to give them the power to define their dashboard the way they like it. And we're going to do this by giving them the option to add, remove, move, and resize widgets. And they should be able to configure widgets through things like data filtering, sorting, etc. Obviously, all of this within the constraints set by you guys, by the developer. The main goal for the end user is that he should be presented with a sleek user experience. The dashboard should look good, and it should be intuitive. It should function the way they'd expect it to. Okay, so now that we have some goals defined, sub-goals for us to work towards, let's talk a little bit about the underlying tech that makes the dashboard framework work. What do we need to accomplish all of this? Well, for one, we need these widgets to be able to be created and destroyed at runtime. We need some sort of fancy logic to position, move, and resize these widgets. And we need an easier way to build these damn widgets. Now, even though this is just 3 bullet points, when you think about what all of these things imply, you'll quickly realize that, wow, this has actually a lot of required tech. Well, what if I told you we've actually been working on this for much longer than just a year? This goes back maybe 4 or 5 years or so ago. So let me take you on a trip, roughly 4 or 5 years ago. We built the web dynamic object container. Now, I think Harm did a very good job explaining what this thing does in his presentation this morning, so I'm briefly just going to very quickly recap and then move on. We added this in DataFlex 19.0 as a library, and then in DataFlex 20, it is now part of the products, where you can add it from the class palette directly into your view. And this thing allows for dynamic creation and deletion of web controls at runtime. I pulled some text from a presentation that I did, I think, a year ago about this thing as well. And in that presentation, I wrote, this is useful when large part of a view are not set in stone. Okay. You have an unknown number of complex objects that can be put into a web list. Sounds useful. And then I also wrote, this is very handy for custom user dashboards. Hint, hint. The main thing this thing does for you is that it prevents creating tons of objects and then hiding them with PB render. So what we would see when people would mimic the usability of a user dashboard in the past, what they would do is they would create a view, they would add like 20 different objects in there, and then depending on what user was logged in, what permissions he had, what roles and rights were associated to this user, they would go through each of these objects and they would set PB render to either true or false, and at the end, 6 or 7 of these objects would still be visible, but all 20 of these objects actually exist. So 1, the code isn't very pretty, and 2, it's also not very efficient. It could be done better. Dynamic Object Container solves that situation. If you want to know more about the Dynamic Object Container, Harm did a very good explanation about this, but we also have a little sample in the web order workspace. We've built a little shopping cart there, so you can look at that if you want to know more about the Dynamic Object Container. So that took us about a year, and we've been incrementally tweaking and improving this thing over the years as well. And then after that year, we built the drag and drop framework. Again, this was already displayed beautifully this morning, so I'm going to keep it very brief. We added this in DataFlex 2022, and this thing basically gave you HTML5 drag and drop functionality directly through DataFlex code. You don't need to do any sort of JavaScript, you don't need to know CSS or HTML. Directly through DataFlex code, you get drag and drop support in your application. The idea is that you add a small C web drag drop helper to your view, You mark which part of your interface you want to be able to pick up. We call them drag sources. And where you want to drop them, we call them drop targets. You implement onDrop, and you're done. So you can pick up parts of your interface and drop them pretty much anywhere. You can drag rows from lists, items from tree views, and tags from tags forms. You can drop them pretty much anywhere, but we have some special actions for those three. The main gain you get from this is that you get a much more intuitive way of interacting with your data. So one of the examples I always like to give is something that we frequently saw, is that you would have two lists side by side, and you would want to be able to move items from one list to the other. And the solution that people were using back then was, okay, you place two buttons in the middle with arrows pointing in either direction. You select an item in one list, click the button, and it would go to the other list. Now with drag and drop, you can get rid of those two buttons, and then straight away pick up one item in a list and drop it right in the other list. Okay, so now we have drag and drop and the dynamic object container. So we got to work on what is now called the grid layout. This was again displayed quite nicely this morning, so I'm going to keep it very brief. We added this in DataFlex 23, so this is pretty recent, and is a new positioning system for the web app framework. It provides you with an alternative to flow layout, where you position your controls using columns, and you basically build your view from the top left to the bottom right with no real vertical space in between. And that was one of the caveats of the flow layout. You really didn't have much control over the vertical positioning of your controls, unless you were willing to jump through a few hoops to make it happen. Now, grid layout aims to solve that, and as you saw in this morning's presentation, this is already very nicely integrated in the Studio's web app designer. And the basic idea is that you define a grid, say 6 columns and 6 rows, which gives you 36 cells. And if you want to place an item directly in the bottom right corner of your screen, you just put the control in that cell, and it'll just be there through the magic of grid layouts. All right, so now we have all 3 components that we need to build a dashboard, right? We need something to make building widgets easier. So we created what is called composite classes. And this is new. We are adding a new keyword to the DataFlex language called the composite. And it kind of looks like this. You're just saying composite, in this case, see my first widget, is a C web widget. And then from there on, you're basically going to write a class as if you were writing an object. So directly inside this composite, you are going to place your child objects, your properties, your procedures, your functions, just like you would with an object inside a view. This is how you build a composite. Now, when you create an instance of this composite, say you put an object declaration of this composite inside a view, all of the stuff that you've defined in that composite, all of these sub-objects that are present, also immediately get created and rendered for you. These composites, as you might have spotted, are used as the base building block for widgets. And we've also already included lots of Studio support for this. We've got a working designer, so if you're working in a composite and you press F7, you actually go into designer and you start working visually as if you were building a view, for example. We also have a working code explorer, so within the composite, you can use the code explorer and jump directly to a sub-object, to a procedure inside the code. All that works. Now, when you start working with composites, you might think, well, this actually looks like simple construct object mapping, doesn't it? And you're partially correct, but just know that we've been tinkering a bit, and there's some black magic going on under the hood that makes a couple of cool things possible. So I've got a little code snippet here. This is a more fleshed out composite. You can see that it already has an object in there, a list, but there's 2 things that stand out in this code, and I'll very briefly give you a moment. Can anyone see one of the 2 things that stand out in this code? If you were in the training yesterday, please give the other people a chance. Anybody? That's the 3rd one, actually. But yes, nested procedure is one of them as well. The fact that you can define the on-row click without having to actually make a completely new class for it. Yeah. Well, here we go, data awareness. Well, so you were very close. Yeah, these things, they can be data aware. You can put a data dictionary in there, and because you can use data dictionaries, because you can make these things data aware, you can also use entry items on this web column in the list. And the second one is this web register path instruction right here. These things, they can perform navigations as well. And while this all sounds very logical, like it should be able to do this, right? This actually cost us quite a bit of work to get right, so there's that. Okay, so now that we've discussed all of the underlying tech, what makes dashboards tick under the hood, let's actually look at the protagonists, the components that make up the new dashboards module. So, I hope this is legible, but I'll read it out loud as well. We are adding 5 new classes to the DataFlex Web App Framework. We are adding the C Web Widgets container, the Web Widgets container internal, the Web Widgets configuration wizard, and the Web Widget palette. Let's look at all of these a little bit more in detail. Fair disclaimer, this is going to be a bit more of a top-level view, so don't expect to know everything by the time I'm done with talking about these things. So first off, the C Web Widget container. This is where the magic happens. This is the thing. This is the thing that you add to your view, and by doing this, you've already unlocked about 80% of what you need to do to make dynamic dashboards a possibility in your application. This will be your main API for the module, and here you'll find instructions like load configuration, to load a dashboard configuration into the container, and save configuration. This thing manages widget administration. You manipulate this administration by using functions like register widget, which lets the container know, okay, well, I've built this little widget here, this composite, and at some point I want to add this widget visibly to my dashboard. So here it is, now that you know about it, you can add it later. And actually adding it is then done by using add widget. This makes a visual instance of that widget on your dashboard. The Web Widget container creates a single instance of the Web Widget container internal upon creation. And this is where the magic really happens. This is the guy that does all the heavy lifting. This is an internal widget container component. It is managed by the widget container wrapper class. And whenever a widget gets added, whenever a widget gets moved or resized, this is the guy in the background that actually makes all of that happen. We don't want you to worry about this thing too much, though. This thing just lives in your code. It does its thing, is working very hard. If you spot it in your code somewhere, don't wonder where it came from. It just lives there, but you're going to be communicating with the widget container, mostly. Next up is the C Web Widgets. And this is the stuff that populates your dashboard. These are these blocks that go onto the screen. And they are basically their own tiny little ecosystem. So bringing up that code snippet again, these things, they can contain one or more controls, multiple controls, and they support data dictionaries. These things can be data-aware controls because of them, and they can perform navigations. And they're created by you. We expect you to use the framework that we provide to create these widgets, and you can get as creative with it as you like. If you want to make a widget that just has a simple button in there that performs a navigation to a view, that's a widget. Want to put a list in there of your latest customers? That's a widget. Want to put a chart control in there that shows you your profits from your last week? That's a widget. Want to get all 3 of those into one big widget? You can also do that. Get creative. You can build whatever you like with it as if it's a view. You build it using composites, and really it is almost like you're building a view. It'll feel very familiar. The C Web Widget palette is a weblist subclass that is specifically designed for working with web widgets. And this thing attaches to your Web Widget container. And it's the good kind of lazy because it takes a lot of work off your hands. This thing is pre-styled, so it looks nice. And it fills itself with the container's registered widgets. So all of the widgets that you register with the container keeps an internal list. This palette reads that list and then fills its own list with all the registered widgets. And it comes with built-in drag and drop support, which is what you saw me do right at the start, where I drag an item off that list directly into my dashboard to add a widget to my container, to my dashboard. Last one is the C Web Widget configuration wizard. And this is where things get a little bit complex. So I'll try to explain as best as I can, and then hopefully with this explanation and a little bit of demonstration, it'll make some sense at the end. But this is the most complex part of this entire widget stuff. The Web Widget configuration wizard is used by the web widgets. And widgets can be what we call configurable. And the idea is then that you have the same widget, but it can behave differently based on configuration. Now, the easiest way I can probably show this to you is by actually going back to the little demo that I had at the start. And if I unlock the dashboard again and I go into edit mode, you can see that these 3 buttons, they have this little edit icon here. And that edit icon indicates, well, this widget is configurable. So what these buttons do right now, this one, for example, this one navigates to new customer. That's one of the actions the widget can perform. If I go into edit mode and I edit this thing, this is that configuration wizard. This dialog is tailored to this widget, and part of this widget is configurable. In this case, we can configure the widget to perform a different action. This is code that we've written ourselves. Now, instead of navigating to new customer, for example, we could say, well, I'd like a salesperson query. I can save it. So this is still that very same widget, but through the magic of configuration, it now navigates to salesperson. So you don't have to build an entire new widget for this. You can just reuse your own existing widgets through configuration, let it do something new. So how do you go about this then? Well, the idea is that you allow a widget to be configured by allocating what we call configurable properties. These properties can be existing properties, like the PS caption of a button, for example. But you can also create new properties and mark those as configurable. And you do that by going into this little procedure called onGetConfigurableProps. And then we have this little convenience function for you, create configurable prop. And here you mark which property is actually configurable. Your web widget will need a configuration wizard. So you do that by setting phoconfig-wizard to ohmywizard. And this ohmywizard will be an implementation of this configuration wizard class. So this class is basically used as an interface. It's a fancy dialog with some framework code in there to make the configuration wizard do its thing. And we expect you to make either a subclass of this or an object based on this class. If you don't want to do that, we do provide a standard implementation which does some property mapping for you. And that'll work just fine as well. Your custom wizard will probably look nicer, though. OK. So the little schematic that I showed earlier actually isn't as flat as 5 things side by side. It actually looks more like this, right? You have the C web widget container, and inside there is that internal container. Inside that internal container is where your widgets live, and each of these widgets don't need to have a configuration wizard. And then we have the web widget palette on the side, which attaches to your container, which just makes your life a little bit easier when trying to add widgets to a dashboard. OK, so how does all of this tie in with the existing tech that I previously discussed? Well, the web widget container and the internal container as well, widgets that are inside that internal container are dynamic objects. And the internal container is actually a very fancy subclass of the dynamic object container. This thing defaults to grid layout. It actually only allows grid layout because that's the layout that makes the most sense for a dashboard. And widgets position themselves using grid layout, and resizing uses that as well. This thing supports drag and drop. As you saw, I can drag from the list and drop directly onto a cell to populate my dashboard with a new widget. And it actually has a fancy, slightly modified web drag drop helper internally as well that it uses for moving and pushing the widgets around. And obviously, the C web widgets are built using the composite keyword. OK, now that we've discussed what the main protagonists are, I would imagine some people in this room are looking a little bit like this guy right now and going, oh, widgets, configuration, container, wrapper, composite, what's going on? And I can understand if you are a little bit lost. So I think I have about 30 minutes or so left, maybe a little bit more. And instead of using those 30 minutes to ramble off and talk about all of the procedures that you're going to use, all of the properties that you're going to encounter, what all the parameters do, I don't want to do that. It's the end of the day. I don't want to bore you guys to death. So what I'd like to do is do a little walk along. I'd like to take an existing application and quickly, in that 30 minutes, try to add a dynamic dashboard to that application. And hopefully, through this little demo, I'll give you an impression of what a typical first encounter when working with dynamic dashboards will look like. OK? So a typical flow when starting to integrate dynamic dashboards could look something like this, right? You find a cool project. I bet you guys have plenty. You throw away your existing dashboard. Actually, don't throw it away. You probably want to park that code somewhere because you're probably going to need it. You're going to add the container, and you're going to build some widgets maybe make them data aware, maybe allow for some configuration. Then you're going to register these widgets with the container. You're going to allow the widgets to be added to the dashboard somehow, through the palette, for example. And then you're going to worry about saving and loading your configuration. Now, in the training yesterday, we went through all of these in detail. But in the training, we had a full day to do this, and we have about 30 minutes left right now. So, again, I want to do a little walk along. I'm going to try and squeeze as much information as possible in 30 minutes time. Therefore, this will be reasonably fast-paced, so stay awake, don't blink. Let's go. So I think Harm was showing this little workspace this morning as well. This is that same resource tracker, that FlexRun application. Very briefly, the idea is that you have these resources, these people right here. You can allocate them to projects, and then you can set how many hours a week they're going to work on this project. Not very complex, doesn't need to be for this kind of thing. But the idea is that you can drag from this and then allocate a resource to a project. You could go into projects, and for example, the Disney presentations. These 3 people, each of them are working a whopping 1 hour a week to prepare the Disney presentations. Okay, but this thing doesn't have a dashboard yet. So how would we go about and add a dynamic dashboard to an application like this, to a FlexRun application? So we would go into File, New, Web Object, and we've got a couple of new templates to work with, and one of them is the Web Dashboard view. Now we'll call this OVW Dashboard Dynamic. There we go. And just by going through this wizard and adding this view, we are already very much on the right track to getting dynamic dashboards done. So it comes with a widget container and some template code for you to fill out. And it also already comes with this palette, so you immediately get the drag and drop support as well, which is hooked up to the widget container. Now I'm going to very quickly actually make sure that we can access this dashboard. So in here, going to go. The font size is big enough for you guys, right? This is legible, right? Good. Okay, and I'll also set the PHO default view to this dashboard so we don't have to navigate there every time again. So if we run this, we now have an extra view in our application called dashboard, and we get this little edit icon that unlocks our dashboard. This would be the palette, but both of them are empty because we don't have any widgets yet, right? So let's get to work and let's actually start creating our very first widgets. So we're going to go into File, New, Web Objects again. And here we have Web Widget, which gives you a little template for a widget to work with. I will call this Project Details. Sure, let's do that. I have to actually rename this. I will name it C Project Details, yes? We agreed on this yesterday. And this will be the start of my widgets using the composite. Now you already get introduced with a bunch of new properties for this widget. We have the PI default call span and row span here. So whenever you add a widget to your dashboard, it will look at this default. And based on this default, the block will be either bigger or smaller to start with. So if you set 1 and 1 here, it will be a very small block. But 4 and 5, you'll get a larger block. Next, we have the PS widget name. And this needs to be a unique identifier. This is what the container uses so that it knows, okay, well, what widget do I need to add to my dashboard the moment you drop something on top of my container, for example. So this needs to be unique. So let's call this Project Details. Now we have the PS widget caption and the PS widget description. These are both used by the palette to populate the list. This actually shows the name and the description in that list. So make this something that makes sense, right? So this is Project Details. And this will be shows project allocation. Because what we want this widget to do is to be able to select a project, and then when we selected a project, we want to be able to see what people are allocated to the project and how many hours a week they are spending. That's the idea. Okay, we are also going to be registering this widget with the container. So you do that by calling on register widget, and you do that in this little procedure right here on register widget. So send register widgets. And then you pass a ref class to this class. It's probably useful if I actually add it first. So project details. Then we go ref class, see project details. There we go. So right now we've created our widget. It is still empty, but we've at least created our widget. And our container knows that we could add this widget to the container at some point. So right now, if we run this again, we click edit, you can see that the list is now actually filled with our project details widget because it knows about it through the container. And we can now actually drag from this palette onto the view, and it will populate the dashboard with our freshly created, but not so exciting widget. So let's make the widget a little bit more exciting. Let's make it so that we can be able to actually select a project. So widgets can be data aware, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is actually add a DDO structure to this widget. We can just go into the DDO Explorer and say, okay, I want to add the project data dictionary. And now I can use this anywhere inside my widget. And I can now say, I want a web combo. I'm going to just drop it into my composite here straight away. I'll actually do it here a little bit better. There we go. Rename it just real fast. Oh, projects. The label will be projects. And this thing will have an entry item because it's going to be bound to the project name. This thing is going to display the currently selected project name. We are also going to be implementing a little event. We're going to be implementing the onChange. And for that to work, we need to set PB server onChange to true as well, otherwise it doesn't do anything. And in here, we're going to say, okay, whenever the value changes, I want you to perform a new find in my data dictionary so the rest of my widget is up to date with whatever we've selected. So I would say send clear of all projects, DD here, and then move the new value, which is the project name, to project.name, and say send find of all projects DD. And I think the index was 3 for the project name. Yep, there we go. Okay. Always fingers crossed when I click this button, but I think this should work. So right now, our widget looks a little bit more fleshed out. There is actually a combo form in there now. When we click on the drop-down, all of the project names are there, and we can select a project, and this would now perform a find to populate the data dictionary. That's cool, but now we can only select a project, and it still doesn't do anything fancy, does it? So let's make a button that actually navigates to the project details page. So we're going to go back into the class palette again. I'm going to add a web button right here. And this button will say project details. And this thing needs to be able to perform a navigation directly to the Zoom project view where we would like it to display the project details of the project that we had currently selected. Now you'd think that would be pretty complicated, but it really is just web register path and to navigate forward to the, I think it's Zoom project. And then in the onClick, all we have to do is send navigate path, and that'll work. So if we run this again, we should now have a button as well. If we select, for example, Disney presentations, click on project details, it will use the information inside the widget's data dictionary to navigate to the project details, populate it with the correct record. So that's navigation in a nutshell. Okay, so we can now directly navigate to the project details, but it would be nice if we could, through our widgets, immediately see the project allocation. So I've already done a little bit of pre-work for this demonstration just to take some work off my hands and save some time. Inside this workspace, I've added our new charts library, which basically makes it easier to add web charts to a web application. I've done this here in undefined scripts, and this basically imports the necessary stuff for the charts library. Don't want you to worry about this too much. It's more important that we integrate this chart into the widget. That's what matters more. So inside our widget again, I'm going to copy and paste a little bit of snippet code, because otherwise it would just take too long. And again, I don't want to concern you with how the charts work. I want to just add this chart to the widget so you can see what it does. So right now we have a little chart object inside our widget, and then we have this reload chart procedure here, which goes through our data dictionaries, finds the allocation for the project that we selected, and uses that to seed the chart with actual data. All we need to do is make sure that this graph actually gets the instruction to be populated, right? So going back to our combo, to this onChange, we would need to call on this reload chart procedure. So send reload chart. So now once we've selected the project, the data dictionary will look up the project, and then it will use that information to say to the chart, okay, well, here's the data that you need. Display it for me, please. Probably also need the project allocation data dictionaries. So let's add those as well. No object to model. No, I was expecting this to work. Let's try this again. Sorry? Ooh, you might be onto something. Maybe I copy and pasted it a little wonky. That might be something. This is my end composites procedure, reload charts, and objects, and objects. Looks good. Face value. I'm gonna cheat a little then. Usually you would go through the DDO Explorer and you'd be able to just add the data dictionary to the widget, but well, lady luck's not on my side when it matters most, it seems. But obviously I rehearsed this a little bit beforehand, so I do have this code already figured out. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over, and that should work. Basically, we're going to be adding the project allocation data dictionary as well, but it needs to do a little bit of constraining and binding, and I don't want to do all of that myself. So there we go. So right now, fingers crossed again. Yes, of course. I need to add the C graph control to this widget. Otherwise, it doesn't know what it is. There we go. Okay. So this widget now, when I select this presentation, should seek to, there we go, populate my chart with data. So in my widget now, I have a data-aware control with a custom control in there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be one of our existing controls. You can actually go get creative and put custom controls in there. And I'm using this custom control to display a fancy graph in a widget. Looks pretty good so far, doesn't it? Okay. How much time do I have left? I got a little bit more. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'd like to show you just one or two more things. I'm going to switch to the finished implementation, because if I have to type everything out, it will probably just take too long. And I've heard our schedule is pretty tight after this. So for the sake of time, I'm going to switch to the finished implementation. What I'll first want to show you is this is what we did in the training yesterday. We made this widget configurable as well. And what we did there is one thing we did is we allowed for this thing to be precede it with a default project name, because right now when you add a new widget to your dashboard, you have to actually go in and select the project, and then it will populate the chart with data. But it would be nice if you would come back to your dashboard and the data would already be there, right? So that's what configuration could do for you. So this widget now, in the finished version, is configurable. And when I click on this little edit icon here, we created a custom config wizard where we can select one of the projects in the list, and then it would use that project to precede the data dictionary with data and therefore load the chart with that data. So the beauty of that is two things. One, I can actually add the same widget twice. And then through the magic of configuration, I could say Disney presentations here. And now I have the exact same widget twice, but with different data. So I could come into my application and just straight up see the data for these two projects. Beauty also is if I save this, I close my application, and I come back, the configuration is actually stored. So I don't have to go back and select this thing again. Through the magic of configuration, this is all still there. So your dashboard is actually a dashboard that gives you information. So very briefly, how did we go about doing that? We went into this project details widget again, and we created two new properties. One of them was the PS default project name, and this PS default project name would then be used to precede our data dictionary with the data based on the project name. So this would be the property, and then we would go into onGet configurable props. And this is where we mark our property as configurable. And here we just said, okay, well, create configurable prop and give a handle to whatever object this prop resides in. In this case, it's the top level, it's in the widgets. And then we pass a handle to what the property is called. And then we put that inside this aConfigurable props array. And that'll let the widget and the container know that this thing is configurable, that we can change it at runtime. What we also did is we implement this onWidget props changed and this onInitialize widget procedure. Both of these do the exact same thing. So in onWidget props change, this gets called every time you change your widget's properties through the configuration wizard. And the onInitialize widget gets called every time the widget is shown for the first time on your dashboard. And in here, we are basically taking this configurable property, this PS default project name, and using it to seed the data dictionary with data. We also created this fancy details config wizard. I won't go into too much detail because this actually gets pretty complex, and the training was more suited for that. But in here, what you could see is that we actually defined this little web switch, this checkbox, and this web list. And we are basically using this configuration wizard. When we click OK, it will look inside this wizard, get the information from the wizard, and feed the values that we've selected back into the widget. And that is how configuration works. And the end result is then that you can, as I showed you, have the same widget multiple times, preceded with data, so it actually looks like a fully functional dashboard. Okay, that's all I have for now. We did skip over quite a few things, but time is short. I don't have a full day to explain everything. But I hope I at least give you an impression of how to work with dynamic dashboards, and you have some idea of how at least the basics work. I do have some closing thoughts, well, one closing thought actually. We've built this with the main goal being dynamic dashboards in mind. But we realized that what we created is actually a fancy container that contains dynamic objects that can be moved around at runtime, they can be configured at runtimes. You don't have to necessarily use this for dynamic dashboards, right? And we kind of expect people over the years to get creative with this. So we're very curious what you guys are going to be using this exciting stuff for. And if you make fancy stuff with this, please let us know. We're very curious. That's my cue. Thank you, guys. Do you have any questions? By all means, go ahead. Do you have any questions? Yes, we did skip over that, but that's a good question. Where is the configuration stored? So by default, the configuration is stored inside your browser's local storage. You don't have to really worry about this much. This just works out of the box. The entire configuration is basically one big container dev struct. It contains the information about your container's grid, and it contains the information about all the widgets that are inside that grid, along with all the configuration for that widget as well. By default, this gets serialized to JSON and then put inside the browser's local storage, which is not very user-safe. So if some other user were to log on, then they would get to see your dashboard. But we do provide hooks on load configuration and on save custom configuration, I think they're called, where you can actually implement your own logic to, for example, store it in a database or retrieve it from a file or whatever you want to do. This was Flextron. Yep, so that works. Yep. Well, in Flextron, there is actually a browser window. So there is a local storage there. So that works. Yep. Anyone else? Yes. Yes. So this is more of a chart-specific question. Can you, in the widget, could you be able to click on one of the pie slices to, I guess, directly navigate to somewhere, right? So this is more of a charts question, not necessarily a widget question, but the charts library that we provide actually maps to various underlying charts library. This was one was chart.js, I think, but we also support high charts and the Syncfusion charts, I think. And we plan to add more along as we go. And I guess depending on which chart library you use, you could actually probably implement stuff like that, yes. Yep. All right, is that it? Cool, then we actually have some decent time to freshen up before tonight's program. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that was the presentation about the dashboards in DataFlex. And I believe that there were a few questions in the chat. If you still have questions, please drop them so we can answer them today for you. Marco and Joseph, can you go over the questions?
Yes, sure. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. It was definitely interesting, I think. A couple of questions from the floor. So we'll ask, is SQL possible in the widgets?
Is SQL possible in the widgets? Yes, it definitely is. So I think in this version or the version before that, we also made big changes to the SQL queries, that how they're executed in DataFlex. And you can actually use that stuff directly in your widget as well. So if you want to make your widget data aware and you don't want to use data dictionaries for that, then SQL is definitely an option. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, that's a good question as well. What the question?
Repeat the question. I didn't hear him.
Oh.
No, jullie, ik hoor hem niet meer.
Oh, can we? Okay.
We lost the sound connection
what
with
type
Marco.
of what can you put into the widgets? Is it DataFlex code, or is there more options?
Yes, well, that's a good question. It's basically, you can do anything in a widget that you can do in a DataFlex web application. So it's all DataFlex code, and it also basically just any control that you can use. As Henry also explained in the presentation, widgets can be data aware. As we just spoke about, you can also have direct you can use direct SQL in your widgets. So basically anything that that you can do in a web framework application can be done in a widget. So that's
okay. Perfect.
Yep.
I believe that the sound from Marco and Joseph isn't coming through in the live stream, but let's try again. If the sound doesn't come through, we will repeat his questions. Marco, are there any more questions?
Yes. So saving the settings for the widget, is that only to the database? Is that only to local storage, or can you also store that in the database?
Henry, up to you.
Yeah, so the question is where is the configuration stored? Is it only stored in the browser, or do you have more options than that? Quick answer, yes. Long answer is that we've made several hooks in the dashboard framework. I think the two main ones being on load configuration, on save custom configuration, top of my head, where you basically get the entire struct that makes up the full configuration of your dashboard. So how big the dashboard is, what widgets are in there, the configuration of those widgets, where they're positioned, how big they are. Everything is inside that struct. And you can use that struct and take that information and, for example, map that to JSON and put that inside of a database field that is mapped to your user. And you can use that to link his configuration to that user, for example. That's one of the options. You can also put it in a config file, whatever you want to do with it. We just give you the data and put it somewhere.
So that's pretty comparable to how the web list does it with the custom column layouts and.
Yeah.
So
very similar. Yes.
Yeah, you implement the right events and.
It's serialized, and then you go from there. Yep.
And is that also a way of how you create a custom dashboard from your code? How you fill it with custom widgets?
What do you mean by that?
When you create a configuration within your DataFlex code and want to put that on the screen, that's basically similar technique.
The multiple ways you could do that. You could, for example, have a JSON configuration and parse that to the struct and then load that. That is an option. You can write DataFlex code and say, I want this widget in my configuration in this part of the dashboard with this configuration that works. Or you can just simply add it through the visual interface. You can drag widgets onto your screen and they'll be part of the configuration. So there's many ways to go about it.
Good.
Any more questions?
Even herhalen, alsjeblieft.
Okay, the sound from Marco is gone again in the live stream, I believe. So let's also repeat the question. If you can drag widgets from one container to the other.
Yeah. So I think the question was, and you can correct me on this one if I was mistaken, but the question was, if you have more than one widget container inside a view, so for example 2, can you drag widgets from one container to the other? We haven't tried this yet, but the widget container itself basically functions off the existing drag and drop logic that we made in a previous version. So you could probably implement on drop and set both containers as drag sources and drop targets. And if you implement on drop correctly, then you should be able to move one widget to another container. I think that should work, yes. I think it should.
So in theory it should, yes. And if you also look at the implementation of the widget palette, that is actually a source for drag and drop. And I'm not 100% sure if a widget container can also be a source, but I would assume so.
I might actually have to try this out after this trip. I think it should work, yes.
Yes, but a widget container at least is a target for drag and drop.
Yes.
So that's yep.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, then we might add it later. So good idea.
Does that answer the question, you think? Good.
So the question being, if you already have a bunch of users that already have their dashboards fully laid out, fully configured, and you have a new widget that you want to push to their dashboard so they can all see it, right?
Yep.
How would you go about that? Okay. So that is not necessarily part of how you work with dashboards, but there is logic inside the dashboard container that allows you to take the configuration that they have, reshape that existing configuration, and then update it. So you could take their configuration from the database, inject your new widget into that, and then the next time they load that configuration, your widget should be there. That I think is one way that you would go about it. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and you have the widget configuration as a version number, so you can increment the version number. Yeah. And that basically invalidates all existing configurations that are stored anywhere. So that basically would have users flip back to the default dashboard. And that's kind of the default way to do it. If you want to preserve the custom dashboards that are stored per user, you'll have to write custom code, like, on initialization, check if a widget is on the screen and add it, if it's not there. So that's...
the invalidation of through the versioning is also a good point. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
So if you start with local storage, can you request that to the server if you then change it to store in the database?
Can you elaborate on that question a little bit more?
So let's say version 1, you want to go live with what's out of box. So you've got your local storage in everybody's browser, got their settings. But then you want to basically pull whatever they have done. In other words, you want to have some sort of event that takes it out of the local storage and presents that JSON to the server so you can store it in a database and change your model where you're more in control of basically introducing new widgets.
Yeah. Okay. You want to take this one?
Oh yeah, I could. So I don't know if the question came through the live stream, but Mark, no, all right. So whenever the dashboard initializes, it starts by loading the configuration out of the local storage, and then it gets to DataFlex code and it actually generates all the dynamic objects. So as part of that, the widget configuration from local storage already goes through the DataFlex code. So you could definitely hook in there and migrate it to somewhere else. So that's definitely an option, right?
Yes, I think his question is a little different though, because I think he's saying, so basically you have version 1 of your application that uses local storage, and then you introduce version 1.5 or something, and where you change from local storage to a database. How do you pull the configuration that is in local storage to your now custom configuration saving logic?
Yes, and that's what I was trying to answer, but yeah, maybe. So when the user then logs into the application, that's when you would have to move the configuration from local storage to the server, because you cannot, log into all users' computers and dig into their local storage whenever you want to. So you have to wait until they access the application. So you will have to, on initialization, check, is this user already using the database, or am I going to use the one that comes from local storage? But you can all do it in DataFlex code. I think.
Definitely. And you will have to write a little bit of logic inside your configuration loading to pull that from local storage, then map that to wherever you want to store it later. Yeah. Okay. Then we're on the same page. Okay.
That's great. Are there more questions?
Okay, yeah, we got one more that was submitted earlier. That is, do the widget also support tablet mode, drag, drop, and customization?
No. So we did make them somewhat responsive in a sense that the default layout does flip to a more mobile, tablet friendly.
Yeah, that's the responsiveness, yes.
Yes, but we did not introduce the fact that you can click edit mode and then resize the configuration for tablets. And the thing here is that while it is in theory possible to have configurations for multiple screen layouts, you would have to know on what screen that configuration was made, right? So if someone makes it on a dashboard or on a desktop, that configuration then gets stored. If you try to load that configuration into a mobile view, it will look like crap. And you would have to save an entirely different configuration for the mobile. So you would have to go about some custom logic for that. But that is why we did not introduce resizing there.
Yeah, besides the responsiveness, can you rearrange a dashboard on a mobile screen, on a tablet? Did we test that? Do we implement the right, drag and drop?
I think that actually does work. I just don't know what the end result will look like once you save it. I think it does work, but
well, if you can rearrange them, I assume the saving works.
Yes, but then it will save the layout for your mobile, and the next time you go onto a desktop, it will not look great.
It will have a different local storage and a different layout.
With local storage is perfectly fine. That's correct. True. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. True.
You agree again? Yay!
We do.
Great.
We do.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, obviously, if it's local storage and if you can't do it on a device without a mouse. Then you're sort of trapped, isn't it?
You will be, yes.
Yes. Yeah. But local storage fixes the problem out of the box. The problem more so arises when you try to save it in a database. Then you would also have to save where the configuration was made on what type of device.
Local storage fixes the problem.
No, that's cool. Oh, and then I guess one more is, can you do dashboards also in a Windows application?
Oh, that's
Go
me.
for it.
Yes, you definitely can. With a couple of revisions back, we introduced Flextron, and Flextron basically allows you to use any web control in a Windows application. So basically, you create a little container in your application that you then run web controls in, and you can definitely use this to integrate the dashboard into your Windows application. So the dashboard is built using web controls, but yeah, using Flextron, you can use those in Windows. So that's a definite yes. Yep.
That's a good last question, I think.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much, DataAccess, for taking the time to speak to all of us.
Thank you for
And,
being here as well.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, all right. Excellent. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Okay.
guys.
And then we also have, of course, more live streams coming up for the May 21st, I believe, and 22nd. Then we have a live stream about technology stack. So please also register for that one. That is on the DataFlex.dev website as well. So you can register for that. If you want to replay this live stream, you can do that by using the same link as you have used for registering for this live stream. So you can replay whenever you like. And if you have any questions for these guys, you can always send them in. So we're really looking forward to the next live stream, I believe. So hope to see you then.